The room smelled of antiseptic as Mark sat frozen by the hospital bed, his chest tightening with dread. The steady beep of the monitor was the only sound, filling the silence with unbearable weight. Mark whispered, "Dad, I'm here, please hold on." His father's pale face seemed distant, each breath shallow, fragile as if fighting to stay. A doctor stepped closer, his eyes heavy with truth too painful to voice. The fluorescent lights flickered above, shadows stretching like ghosts across the floor. Mark's mother clutched his arm, trembling, tears streaming silently. She whispered, "We can't lose him, not now." The doctor finally said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do." Mark felt the world collapse, his voice breaking as he shouted, "No, please, there must be something." The walls closed in, the reality of finality pressing down like suffocating weight. His father's hand twitched faintly, reaching weakly for him. Mark leaned close, tears falling onto the sheets. His father's lips trembled as he whispered, "Remember my words." The sentence pierced Mark's soul, heavy with meaning. The monitor flatlined, echoing through the room like a cruel bell. Mark cried out, collapsing against the bed, his heart shattering into pieces too sharp to ever mend. Mark stumbled out of the hospital room, his knees weak beneath the weight of grief. The corridor stretched endlessly, sterile walls closing in like a suffocating prison. His mother clung to his sleeve, whispering broken words he could not hear. Mark said, "How do I live without him?" The hallway smelled of bleach, each step echoing emptiness. Nurses passed by, their eyes lowering in sympathy, their silence louder than any condolence. Mark's chest burned as he pressed his fist against it, trying to contain the ache. He recalled his father's last words, haunting him like an unbroken echo. "Remember my words." His voice cracked. Why now? Why those words? The world blurred through his tears, each breath a fight against the drowning weight. He pressed his forehead against the cold wall, desperate for air, desperate for meaning in the moment that shattered his existence. Mark stepped outside the hospital into the chill of night. The air cut through him, cold and merciless, yet he barely felt it. The parking lot glowed faintly beneath streetlights, shadows stretching long and lonely. His mother whispered prayers under her breath, each word dissolving in the wind. Mark said, "Why does the world still move when mine has stopped?" Cars passed by beyond the gates, indifferent to his grief. He tilted his head back, staring at the empty sky, searching for a sign, a reason. His father's voice echoed again, fragile but insistent, "Remember my words." Mark's breath caught, tears streaking as his voice broke. "What did you mean, Dad?" His hands clenched tightly, knuckles white, as if grasping air could bring back what was gone. The night swallowed his cries, leaving silence as his only companion. Back at home, Mark sat in the living room, where silence roared louder than sound. His mother curled into the corner of the sofa, face hidden in her hands, rocking gently. Mark said, "He's gone, Mom. How do we go on?" The clock ticked mercilessly, each second a stab into his chest. The family photos on the wall seemed to stare at him, reminders of what was lost. He ran his hand through his hair, gripping tight, trying to hold himself together. His father's chair sat empty, its presence more painful than absence. The words echoed again in his mind, sharp as glass. "Remember my words." Mark's tears flowed freely as he whispered, "I will, Dad, but I don't know how." The room felt colder than the night outside, as if grief itself froze the air. Mark lay awake in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling as moonlight carved silver lines across the walls. His mother's muffled sobs echoed faintly from her room, piercing the silence. He whispered, "I can still hear you, Dad." His father's last words spun relentlessly in his head, impossible to silence. The weight of them grew heavier, pressing like an unseen hand on his chest. Mark closed his eyes, wishing for a dream, a memory, anything that could bring him close again. He whispered shakily, "Why those words? What do they mean?" The room seemed alive with echoes, shadows shifting with the breeze through the curtains. His fists clenched, determination sparking beneath the grief. "I'll find the meaning," he said aloud, voice cracking, "because it's all I have left of you." Morning sunlight crept into Mark's room, but it brought no warmth. He sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, staring blankly at the floor. His chest felt heavy, a weight he could not lift. His mother knocked softly, her voice trembling as she said, "Mark, we should eat something." He answered, "I can't. My stomach feels like stone." She walked in, her eyes swollen, holding 2 mugs of tea that trembled in her hands. Mark forced himself to meet her gaze, but the grief in her eyes mirrored his own. He whispered, "Why did Dad say those words? Why not 'I love you' or 'goodbye'?" His mother's lips quivered as she replied, "Maybe he wanted you to hold on to something deeper." Silence swallowed the room. The tea cooled untouched. Mark whispered, "But I don't even know what he meant." His mother placed the mug on the nightstand and sat beside him, resting her hand on his shoulder. She said softly, "Then we'll find out together." The kitchen smelled faintly of bread, but the atmosphere was heavy. Mark sat across from his mother at the small wooden table, both staring at plates they could not touch. She said, "He believed in you, Mark. You know that." Mark clenched his fists, replying, "Then why leave me with riddles instead of peace?" The clock ticked loudly above them, every second dragging. His mother pressed her hand over his and whispered, maybe his words weren't a burden, but a gift. Mark shook his head, his jaw tight. He muttered, "A gift that feels like a chain." His mother's tears welled again, and she whispered, "He wanted you to remember more than his absence." Mark sighed, burying his face in his hands. He whispered, "I'm not ready to carry this." His mother said, "You don't have to carry it alone." Later, Mark wandered into the living room, staring at the shelves lined with his father's books. He trailed his fingers across the spines, whispering, "Were you trying to tell me something, Dad?" His mother appeared in the doorway, holding a worn photo of their family taken years ago. She said, "He always believed knowledge carried truth." Mark took the photo, staring at his father's smiling face. His throat tightened as he whispered, "He looks so alive here." His mother nodded, whispering, "And he wanted you to live, not just survive." Mark set the photo back on the table and collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. His mother stood silently, giving him space, her eyes fixed on the empty chair where her husband once sat every evening. The silence between them was filled with absence. Mark sat outside on the porch, the cold wind brushing his face. He clutched his father's old jacket around him, inhaling the fading scent. His mother stepped out quietly, wrapping her own shawl tight. She said softly, "That jacket always made him look strong." Mark replied, "Now it feels like armor that's too heavy." His mother lowered herself into the chair beside him, staring out at the barren yard. She whispered, "Strength isn't about holding back tears. It's about letting them fall and still moving forward." Mark stared at the horizon, his jaw trembling. He whispered, "I don't know if I can." She reached for his hand, her fingers cold but firm. She said, "Then lean on me until you can." The wind carried their silence, sharp yet oddly comforting. That night, Mark lay awake again, his father's jacket folded on the chair beside his bed. He whispered, "You said to remember your words, Dad, but what do they mean?" The words echoed endlessly in his mind, louder than the ticking clock. His mother's footsteps passed faintly in the hallway, her presence a fragile comfort. Mark pressed his hands over his face, whispering, "Why couldn't you just tell me what to do?" He rolled onto his side, staring at the ceiling where moonlight cast shifting patterns. His father's voice returned in memory, soft but commanding, "Remember my words." Mark whispered fiercely, "I will. I'll find out no matter what it takes." His chest ached, but for the first time, resolve sparked beneath the grief. His eyes closed slowly, tears streaking down into his pillow as exhaustion claimed him. Mark returned to work a week later, but the office felt like a foreign land. The hum of computers, the shuffle of papers, and the chatter of colleagues, all blurred into a dull roar. He sat at his desk, staring at the glowing screen, his father's words echoing louder than any thought. A co-worker, Daniel, said softly, "You okay, man? You've seemed miles away." Mark forced a nod, muttering, "Yeah, just tired." Inside, his chest tightened. The words replayed, "Remember my words." His emails stacked up, unanswered. He felt the weight of every unfinished task pressing like bricks. His boss approached, eyes narrowed, saying, "Mark, we need you focused. Don't let personal things drag you down." Rage stirred in him, but grief held stronger. He whispered under his breath, "You don't understand." His hands trembled over the keyboard, unable to type. The office noise faded as silence filled his mind, pulling him back to his father's last breath. At lunch, Mark sat alone in the cafeteria, pushing food around his tray. Daniel joined him, saying, "You've got to eat, man." Mark replied, "Food feels like ash in my mouth." Daniel leaned forward, his voice quiet. "I heard about your dad. I'm sorry, Mark. I know words don't fix it." Mark's throat tightened, whispering, "He left me words that broke me more." Daniel frowned, asking, "What did he say?" Mark shook his head, whispering, "I don't even know what they mean." Silence stretched between them, filled by the clatter of trays and voices around. Mark finally muttered, "It's like he gave me a key but no door." Daniel said, "Maybe you'll find the door when you're ready." Mark stared at the untouched food, his eyes wet, whispering, "I'm not ready for anything." That evening, Mark walked the quiet streets alone, the city lights glowing like distant stars. The wind carried faint voices of strangers, laughter that cut into his grief. He pulled his jacket tighter, whispering, "Dad, why did you leave me with this?" Passing a bookstore, he paused at the window. The shelves inside glowed warmly, filled with knowledge his father once loved. He heard his father's voice in memory. "Knowledge carries truth." His chest ached as he stepped inside, the smell of old pages wrapping him in nostalgia. He trailed his fingers along the books, whispering, "Are your words hidden here?" The shopkeeper glanced at him curiously, but said nothing. Mark's eyes filled as he whispered, "I don't even know where to begin." He bought nothing, leaving with heavier steps than before. At home, Mark sat with his mother in the dim living room. She whispered, "He once told me he wanted you to find your own path." Mark's fists clenched as he replied, "But why leave me lost?" His mother said softly, "Because sometimes the struggle shows us who we are." Mark stared at the empty chair where his father once sat, his voice trembling. "I don't feel strong, Mom. I feel broken." She placed her hand gently over his, whispering, "Broken doesn't mean weak. It means human." Tears slid down his face as he whispered, "Then why do I feel like I'm failing him already?" She pulled him close, her own tears falling as she said, "You haven't failed. You're still here, and that's enough for now." The silence that followed was heavy but softer than before. Later that night, Mark stood before the mirror in the bathroom, staring at his own reflection. His eyes looked hollow, like a stranger's. He whispered, "What do your words want from me?" His father's voice returned in memory, faint but insistent. "Remember my words." Mark gripped the sink, veins showing on his arms, his breath ragged. He muttered, "I'm trying, Dad, but I'm drowning." Water dripped from the faucet, echoing in the silence. He splashed his face, but the reflection still looked broken. His chest heaved as he whispered, "You were supposed to guide me, not leave me." Tears fell again, and his voice cracked, "I can't do this without you." The reflection blurred through his tears, leaving him feeling both lost and determined. He whispered shakily, "Then I'll find the meaning, even if it kills me." Mark sat in the attic surrounded by boxes of his father's belongings. Hey! Dust floated through streaks of sunlight that pierced broken blinds. He whispered, "Maybe he left something here." His fingers trembled as he opened an old wooden chest, uncovering letters bound with faded ribbon. His mother climbed the steps slowly, whispering, "He kept things from before you were born." Mark pulled a letter free, the paper yellowed and fragile. He read aloud, "To my son, when you are lost." His chest tightened, his voice breaking. His mother froze, tears glistening, whispering, "He wrote to you, Mark." The words blurred through his tears. He muttered, he knew this day would come. The attic felt heavier, filled with echoes of the past pressing in from every corner. His hands shook as he clutched the letter, whispering, "These are the words he wanted me to remember." Mark sat cross-legged on the attic floor, reading aloud while his mother listened, silent, tears streaking her cheeks. The letter said, "Life will test you and I cannot guide you. Remember my words, strength is love, not pride." Mark's breath caught. He whispered, "This is it. This is what he meant." His mother pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering, "He wanted you to live with his heart, not his pain." Mark's tears blurred the ink, dripping onto the paper. He whispered, "Why hide this away?" His mother said softly, "Maybe he wanted you to find it when you were ready." Mark clutched the letter to his chest, whispering fiercely, "Then I'll carry these words like armor." The attic grew silent again, but it was no longer empty. The weight shifted, sorrow mixing with clarity. Later, Mark stood in his father's study, shelves lined with books and journals. He placed the letter on the desk, whispering, "Your words will guide me now." His mother hovered in the doorway, whispering, this was always his sanctuary. Mark ran his fingers along the desk, feeling the grooves carved by years of use. He whispered, "It feels like he's still here." His mother nodded, tears brimming, whispering, "A part of him is t." Mark picked up one of his father's journals, flipping through scribbled notes, sketches, and underlined passages. He said, "He left pieces of himself everywhere." His mother whispered, "So you'd never feel alone." Mark's voice cracked, "Then why do I still feel broken?" She replied, "Because grief doesn't leave quickly, but his words will stay." The study glowed softly, filled with both loss and presence. That night, Mark sat on his bed with the letter open in his lap. He read again, "Strength is love, not pride." His chest ached as he whispered, "Dad, I hear you now." His mother peeked in, asking softly, "Do you want me to stay?" Mark shook his head, whispering, "Not tonight. I need to feel him." She nodded gently, retreating. Alone, Mark stared at the words, tracing the ink with trembling fingers. He whispered, "You wanted me to find meaning, not despair." Tears slid down his cheeks, but his breathing steadied. He whispered again, "Strength is love, then I'll carry that." The room felt alive, not with grief, but with echoes of his father's presence, lingering like a soft shadow that refused to leave. For the first time since the hospital, Mark felt less alone. Mark walked to the cemetery the next morning, letter folded carefully in his pocket. The sky was gray, the air cool with mist clinging to the grass. He knelt by his father's grave, pressing his palm to the cold stone. He whispered, "I found them, Dad. I found your words." His chest tightened, but his tears felt different, not just grief but release. He pulled the letter out, reading softly, "Strength is love, not pride." His voice broke as he whispered, "I'll live by that." His mother stood behind him, her shawl wrapped tightly, watching silently. Mark pressed his forehead against the stone, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Dad." The wind stirred, carrying the letter's edges, as if answering. Mark's tears fell onto the soil, but this time they watered something new, resolve. Mark stood outside Daniel's apartment, fists clenched, heart pounding like war drums. He whispered, "I can't carry this alone anymore." Daniel opened the door, surprised, saying, "Mark, you look like hell." Mark stepped inside, his voice shaking. "I found a letter from my dad. It wasn't just words. He wanted me to change how I live." Daniel motioned him to sit, whispering, "Then let it change you, don't fight it." Mark sat on the couch, shoulders heavy, whispering, "I'm afraid I'll fail him." Daniel leaned forward, saying, Failing isn't falling, it's refusing to get up. Mark buried his face in his hands, tears breaking free. He muttered, "I don't know how to be strong," Daniel said firmly. "Strength isn't never breaking, it's finding a way through the break." Mark whispered, "Then maybe I'm stronger than I thought." Mark walked into his father's workplace the next day, a workshop filled with tools, sawdust, and unfinished projects. He whispered, "Dad, this was your world." His mother followed, her hand brushing wood shavings, whispering, "He loved this place." Mark stared at a half-finished chair, his chest aching. He whispered, "He wanted me to finish what he started." His mother said softly, "Maybe that's how you honor his words." Mark picked up a chisel, hands trembling, whispering, "I don't know if I can." His mother smiled faintly, whispering, "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to try." Mark's breath steadied as he placed the tool against the wood. He whispered, "Then this will be my beginning." The workshop filled with echoes of the past, but also the rhythm of something new. Hours later, Mark wiped sweat from his brow, wood shavings scattered across the floor. His hands ached, but he continued shaping the chair. He whispered, "Dad, every strike of this tool is for you." His mother sat quietly in the corner, her eyes glistening, whispering, "He would be proud." Mark's arms trembled with exhaustion, but he pushed forward. His father's words rang again. "Strength is love, not pride," he whispered fiercely. "Then I'll finish this with love." A crack formed in the wood, and Mark flinched, whispering, "I ruined it." His mother said softly, "No, you gave it life." Mark steadied himself, continuing, his movements slower, more deliberate. With each cut, his grief turned to purpose, his despair into rhythm. He whispered, "This isn't just wood, it's memory." Late at night, the chair stood nearly finished. Mark traced its edges with tired hands, whispering, "It's not perfect, but it's mine." His mother stepped forward, resting her hand on the backrest, whispering, "It's beautiful, Mark." His eyes filled as he muttered, "It feels like he's here." His mother said, "That's because you built it with love, not fear." Mark sat on the chair, his chest rising with both grief and relief. He whispered, "For the first time, I feel like I heard him clearly." His mother whispered, "And he'll always speak through you." Mark closed his eyes, exhausted but lighter, whispering, "I'll carry his words forever." The room was silent except for the creak of wood beneath him, a sound that felt alive. The next morning, Mark carried the finished chair to the cemetery, his arms straining but his heart resolute. He placed it beside his father's grave, whispering, "This is for you, Dad." His mother stood behind, shawl wrapped tight, tears streaming silently. Mark sat in the chair, facing the gravestone, whispering, "Your words gave me strength. Strength through love." His voice broke as he said, "I'll live by that, every day." The wind stirred, brushing against his face, carrying the faint scent of sawdust still clinging to the wood. Mark pressed his palm to the grave, whispering, "I'm not lost anymore." His mother whispered softly behind him, "He's still with you." Mark closed his eyes, the ache still present, but his chest finally felt lighter. The chair stood as both memory and promise, carved from grief, but built on love. Mark sat in the living room days later, the wooden chair now resting quietly by the window. He whispered, "It doesn't hurt as sharply anymore." His mother, holding a steaming cup of tea, replied softly, "That's because you've begun to heal." Mark stared at the chair, his voice trembling. "I thought I'd never make it past that night." She touched his shoulder, whispering, "You carried him through every tear, every word." Mark let out a shaky breath, saying, "His words don't feel like chains now. They feel like roots." His mother smiled faintly, whispering, "Roots that will steady you." Mark wiped his eyes, whispering, "For the first time, I feel like I can breathe." Silence wrapped the room, but this time it felt comforting, not crushing. The chair, imperfect yet strong, became a quiet reminder that love could outlast despair. Mark walked through the neighborhood park, crisp autumn leaves crunching underfoot. He whispered, Every step feels lighter now. Daniel jogged up beside him, smiling, saying, "You're finally looking like yourself again." Mark laughed faintly, whispering, "I didn't think I'd ever smile." Daniel said, "Grief never leaves, but it stops crushing you." Mark looked at the sky, whispering, "He told me to remember his words. I thought they were a burden, but now they're a compass." Daniel patted his shoulder, whispering, "That's how you honor him." Mark smiled softly, saying, "Strength is love, not pride." The phrase rolled off his tongue with newfound certainty. Daniel nodded, whispering, "Sounds like you're ready to live again." The breeze carried their words like a promise to the open sky. At dinner that night, Mark and his mother sat together at the table, candles flickering softly. His mother whispered, "It feels good to see you eat again." Mark smiled faintly, saying, "It feels good to taste food again." They shared a quiet laugh, brief but genuine. Mark looked at her and whispered, "I've been so focused on my pain I forgot you lost him too." Her eyes glistened as she replied, "I lost my husband, but I couldn't lose my son too." Mark reached across the table, holding her hand. He whispered, "We'll carry him together." She nodded, whispering, "Together." The clock ticked on the wall, but its sound no longer stung. It marked the steady rhythm of a life continuing. For the first time in weeks, their meal ended not with tears, but with hope. Mark visited the workshop again, the scent of wood shavings still clinging in the air. He whispered, "This place doesn't hurt anymore." His mother, standing beside him, whispered, "That's because it's no longer just his, it's ours now." Mark ran his hands over the finished chair, whispering, "He taught me through absence what he couldn't through presence." His mother nodded, whispering, "He gave you the strength to find your own way." Mark's chest swelled as he whispered, "I'll carry his lessons forward, not as weight, but as guidance." His mother placed her hand on his, whispering, "That's what he wanted." The tools lay silent, but instead of grief, they felt like companions of memory. Mark whispered, "Then this place will be my reminder to build, not break." That evening, Mark stood outside on the porch, watching stars pierce the dark sky. He whispered, "I feel you in the silence, Dad." His mother joined him, shawl around her shoulders, whispering, "He's always here in every word, every breath." Mark smiled faintly, whispering, "Strength is love, not pride." "I'll live by that." His mother placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "And I'll walk with you." The night air was cool, but no longer heavy. Mark's tears slipped down, not as sorrow, but as release. He whispered, "I'm not broken anymore. I'm becoming whole." The stars shimmered above, and for the first time, he felt small yet safe. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was presence, carrying his father's words into forever. The morning sun poured into Mark's bedroom, warm and soft against his face. He whispered, "I made it through the night without drowning." His mother knocked gently before entering, smiling faintly as she said, "You're stronger than you think." Mark sat up slowly, whispering, "I still miss him with every breath." She replied softly, "Missing him means you loved him deeply. That love doesn't leave." Mark nodded, his voice breaking, "I hear his words every morning now." She walked closer, brushing his hair back like when he was a boy. She whispered, "Then his voice still guides you." Mark clutched the folded letter on his nightstand, whispering, "Strength is love, not pride." He pressed it to his chest, whispering, "I'll carry that forever." His mother whispered back, "That's how he'll always live in you." The day felt new, not easy, but filled with purpose. Mark returned to the cemetery alone later that day, the wooden chair still resting beside his father's grave. He whispered, "I'm here again, Dad." His hands shook slightly as he placed fresh flowers at the base of the stone. He whispered, "I finished what you started, and I found your words." The wind stirred leaves across the ground, almost like an answer. Mark sat on the chair facing the gravestone, whispering, "I'll live by strength through love." His voice cracked, "I'll make choices you'd be proud of." He pressed his hand against the stone, whispering, I'm not afraid anymore." The silence was heavy, but it no longer crushed, it steadied him. He whispered again, "I'll carry you in every step forward." His tears fell softly, not as torment, but as devotion. That evening, Mark joined Daniel at a small cafe downtown. Daniel said warmly, "You look lighter than before." Mark smiled faintly, replying, "I feel like I've finally let him guide me instead of haunt me." Daniel nodded, sipping coffee, whispering, "That's growth, man." Mark looked out the window at passing strangers, whispering, "I used to envy people who lived without grief. Now I see grief as proof of love." Daniel smiled, whispering, "And love is proof of strength." Mark laughed softly, whispering, "That's something my dad would have said." Silence fell between them, but it was warm, like the steam rising from their mugs. Mark whispered, "I'll remember his words not as pain, but as direction." Daniel said gently, "Then you've already honored him." Back home, Mark and his mother sat in the living room together, the wooden chair now placed in a corner of honor. His mother whispered, "This feels right." Mark nodded, whispering, "It feels like a part of him is always here." He stood and touched the chair's backrest, whispering, "I built it with love, not pride." His mother's tears glistened as she whispered, "He would have said the same." Mark smiled softly, whispering, "Then I finally understand him." The room glowed under the lamplight, shadows gentle instead of harsh. For the first time, their silence was filled with peace. Mark whispered, "This house doesn't feel empty anymore." His mother whispered back, "Because love fills it." Together they sat quietly, their grief no longer raw but softened into memory. That night Mark lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as moonlight traced patterns on the wall. He whispered softly, "I miss you, Dad, but I'll live for you." He closed his eyes, hearing the echo of his father's voice once more. "Strength is love, not pride." Tears slid gently down his face, but his lips curved into a faint smile. He whispered, "I'll carry your words until my last breath." The night air was cool, but it no longer felt heavy. He whispered again, "I'll be okay." His chest rose with a steady rhythm, no longer crushed, but calm. The silence of the room wrapped around him like a promise, carrying the final weight of his father's words into his heart. Sleep claimed him gently, with love as his anchor.